Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. My name is Ryan Keller. I'm 40 years old, former Navy SEAL, now running a small private security consultancy in Austin. Friday night wasn't my idea. She called it a small get-together, the kind with corks on the counter and laughter that gets louder as the bottle's empty. I went because I keep my word, and because showing up is cleaner than arguing. I parked a block away, cut the engine, sat for a breath, and told myself to keep it calm, keep it factual, take the temperature of the room, and act accordingly. Old habits. They've kept me alive in places far less friendly than a suburban living room. Something had been off for months. Not a single moment. More like a pattern stitched from small threads. Her phone migrating everywhere with her, face down on the table. New passwords she forgot to share. Late nights that came with short temper and long explanations. The way conversation at home turned into cross-examination, and every attempt to connect was graded like homework she didn't assign. I watched without accusing. Watching is a kind of power. You learn the cadence. You learn the tells. You learn when to move and when to stay still. The host's place was already warm with bodies when we walked in. Music low, dim lamps, the usual scatter of shoes at the door. Her friends clustered near the kitchen island, arms linked by shared opinions. I recognized two from photos, the ones who write posts about self-worth and spend their evenings measuring men by punchlines. The air had that tight feeling of a room with a joke preloaded. She drifted to them without looking back. I took in exits, windows, the narrow hallway to the bathroom, because my brain is wired that way whether I want it to be or not. She was bright and animated in a way I hadn't seen at home. Not warmth, performance. Every gesture a little larger than necessary, every laugh a touch too sharp. When I joined the circle, the conversation hiccuped. Quick smiles. Finn. Someone made a crack about men who think spreadsheets are leadership. I don't use spreadsheets much. The line wasn't for me. It was for her reaction. She smiled like she'd earned it. I took a sip of seltzer and let it pass. A man appeared at her side and slid into the empty space like it had been kept open for him. Tall, narrow frame, expensive sneakers that were trying hard. He introduced himself to anyone but me. The glance he threw in my direction was the kind you give a parking cone. Noticed, then ignored. He talked with his hands, touched her elbow, leaned close to say something private, then looked around to make sure everyone saw him being private. I filed the data without feeding it. When you've been trained to read trouble, you stop being surprised by how basic it is. More little shots came across the bow. If I laughed at a story, it was, wow, you're in a good mood. If I stood quiet to let people speak, it was, cat got your tongue? She loved it. Not me. This audience version of herself. At home, my questions lately had been met with sighs. Here, she didn't stop talking. It was a relief in a strange way. Masks are easier to negotiate than confusion. I handled the room with the same discipline I used to handle unknown terrain. Move slow. Don't crowd. Let people reveal their positions. I made small talk with the host about the new fence he was building. I offered to help him brace the posts next weekend and meant it. I carried dishes to the sink. I refilled water pitchers. I didn't drink. I haven't in years. The more they relaxed, the clearer their pattern became. Build the stage. Draw me under the lights. Wait for the crack. She started the small jabs. You're very quiet tonight. Then graduated to public corrections. I asked if anyone wanted ice. She rolled her eyes. I mentioned a trail run tomorrow. She laughed to the group about midlife crises and new hobbies, even though I've been running since 19. Her friend chimed in about men who need to prove they're still relevant. It landed the way they wanted it to. Heads tilted, smirks lined up like they'd practiced in a mirror. I let the wave pass through me. I've ridden worse. The lover, no one said the word, but the shape of it was obvious, kept orbiting. His confidence inflated as the night wore on and the corks kept popping. He asked me if my security thing meant I installed doorbells. He asked if I missed shooting stuff. He called me buddy in the tight, bright tone men use when they're hoping someone will do their fighting for them. I washed his hands, not because I was worried, but because hands tell the truth when mouths don't. He had the kind of strength you get from mirror work, not labor. Plenty for a selfie. Not much for problem solving. I don't create scenes, and I don't let other people draft me into theirs. I check my watch once, out of habit. I texted my operations manager about a Monday briefing. which served two purposes. It reminded me of my life outside this room, and it put a timestamp in a thread if I needed one. Quiet signs of order matter when chaos is trying to sell itself as fun. I'd already moved anything sentimental out of shared drawers at home last week. Not running, just contingency. I've learned to make decisions when my head is cool, not when my face is hot. It didn't get hot until the touch. She had been gathering steam, circling closer each pass, teasing me as if I were a prop that could deliver her the applause she wanted. Then she stepped in, close enough for perfume and wine on her breath, and delivered the line she'd been saving. I don't remember the words. I remember the impact. Open palm. Left cheek. Not hard enough to knock me back. Hard enough to try to knock me down inside. The sound was small and sharp, like a kitchen drawer snapping shut. The room froze for half a breath. Then the cheering started, quick and nervous, the way people clap when they've seen a magic trick and don't know where to look. I tasted copper, but it wasn't blood. It was control. I kept my shoulders square and my breathing steady, and I let the noise roll over me. The host's wife looked away. One friend filmed for a second and then remembered herself. Another laughed too loudly and cut it off mid-note. I stood there and let them see I wasn't going to become the animal they wanted. Silence in a storm changes the weather. That's when he moved. The lover stepped forward because an empty stage scares the kind of men who need it. He smirked like his mouth had trained for this more than his body ever had. He started with the easy shots: career, passion, clothes. Things that don't matter to anyone who's had to carry themselves through the dark without an audience. He got closer than politeness allows and let his finger float a little too near my chest, daring contact without committing to it. He thought he was choosing how the night would go. He didn't understand that I had already chosen. I didn't say much. The slap, the cheers, these were the loud parts. The important part was quiet. A decision. The line between being provoked and being moved. I've crossed deserts and oceans, and the kind of rooms where the wrong twitch costs more than embarrassment. This was just a living room with brittle laughter and borrowed courage. I let my jaw unclench, looked past him to the door, charted the path if I wanted it, and then brought my eyes back to center. People say real manhood is loud. They've never seen it work. The setup was complete. They had their audience, their script, their hero in soft sneakers. They thought they'd written my role, too. They were about to learn I don't audition. The slap didn't move me, it organized me. Noise to my left, clapping to my right, his cologne in front of me. I let my breath settle into 4 counts in, 4 counts out, the way I used to inside a helicopter when the terrain below looked unfriendly. Calm isn't a feeling. It's a posture you choose and maintain when everyone else is borrowing courage from the crowd. She tried to turn the moment into a comedy bit. Look at him, so stoic. She wanted the room to laugh with her, to lock in the humiliation. The ones who didn't look at the floor or the ceiling or their drinks, anywhere but my face. People always tell on themselves in the first 10 seconds after a bad act. She told me she needed the laugh more than the truth. I filed it away. He stepped closer because that's what men do when they believe a stage makes them bigger. The muscles in his jaw worked like he'd practiced his smirk in a mirror. He took up space with his shoulders, not his spine. He wanted my eyes. He wanted me to flinch so he could point at it and say, "See? Soft." I gave him nothing. I let him see how little his performance mattered to someone who has already learned the difference between danger and drama. "You good, man?" The host's voice floated from somewhere behind him, thin with nerves. I didn't answer. I wasn't going to have a conversation through a proxy. If a man wants me, he can come get me himself. He did. He leaned in until I could count the flex in his iris and the micro tremor in his cheek. That tremor told me he wasn't as sure as he wanted to be. She hovered on his flank, just inside my periphery, cheating close like a coach whispering plays into a quarterback's helmet. Her friends ring the island, phones low but not away, hands hovering over record like moths near a bulb. The room tightened into a circle without anyone saying the word. Herd behavior is fast. You either get cut by it or you step outside its radius. I stayed where I was and made the radius adjust to me. "What's going on?" I asked it without heat. It wasn't a plea. I wanted to hear how she'd frame it in front of witnesses. Words matter. They travel. They show up later in paperwork and in the mirror. She smiled with half her mouth. "Nothing. We're having fun." That word again. Fun. It's always the word used to excuse cruelty. In my line of work, Fun is what people say they're after when they're really hunting the high of power without the cost of accountability. I nodded once to let her know I'd heard the answer and rejected it. Then I returned to the only person in the room who might still be reachable by simple instructions. Back up. 2 words. Low enough to be gentle, clear enough to be law. He laughed and didn't move. He tapped my sternum with 2 fingers like he was pairing a Bluetooth device. That touch was small, but it carried intent. The room exhaled like a choir. They wanted contact. Contact means permission to turn your manhood into content. I didn't give it to them. Not yet. She threw another line into the mix about me being sensitive, about not being able to handle strong women. A chorus of mm-ums rose from the island. The host's wife said his name like a warning and then swallowed the rest of the sentence. I kept my shoulders square, my feet under me, my palms open and visible, nothing loose or swinging. You telegraph peace the same way you telegraph violence, through posture. He got braver on the back of their noise. He called me a mall cop. He asked if my SEAL thing was like a summer camp. He told the room he'd teach me how to handle a woman who has fire. I watched his throat when he said fire and saw the dry swallow. Performance, again. People think mockery is dominance. It's not. It's camouflage. You don't want to do this. I said it evenly. Not a threat. A fact, given as a courtesy. He leaned so close our foreheads could have touched if I'd given him the last inch. He smelled like citrus and ambition. The finger came again, harder into the center of my chest. The phones lifted a little higher. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." The host stepped sideways to block a vase with his body, as if he could keep the night from breaking if he saved the decor. I respect that kind of man. He understands order even if he can't enforce it. I softened my knees a fraction and shifted my weight off the line of his hips. It looked like nothing. It changed everything. If he wanted that last inch, he'd have to overcommit. I set my glass on the counter without looking. Hands empty. Choices open. In my head, I laid out 3 plans. Leave, neutralize, freeze the room with 5 words and walk. All of them kept me in control. Only one required hands. I prefer the plans with fewer variables. I prefer not to bleed on people's floors. She noticed the shift and mistook it for retreat. That told me more than any text thread ever could. She needed my withdrawal to keep her mask from slipping. She told him I was harmless. He smiled wider. He needed to believe her because her story was oxygen to him. Without it, he was just a man in expensive sneakers poking another man to see if he could borrow his life for a minute. I gave him one more line to climb down. Back up, or be done. No decoration, no insult, no invitation. I'm generous exactly twice when the stakes are low. After that, I let reality do the teaching. He chose badly. He thumped my chest a 3rd time, a little off-center, the way boys do when they don't know the body they're speaking to. His wrist rolled at the end of the gesture, trying to turn a tap into a shove. He wanted the footage to show movement so the story would write itself later. Look, he pushed me. The trick is older than the furniture we were standing next to. Her friends sang out, "Ooh, like a playground." One of them told me to calm down, which is what people say to the calmest person in the room when they're scared the storm might move off the script. Another said, "Don't be toxic," which is what people say when they want you to sit perfectly still while they take their turn. I looked at the host and saw he hated all of it and didn't know how to stop it without losing friends. It's a hard place to be. I gave him a nod to say I understood. Then I returned my attention to the only target that mattered. Final warning. Same tone. Same volume. Same offer of dignity. His lips formed a word that never made it to sound. He wasn't brave. He was buoyed. He needed their eyes. He needed her smirk. He needed me to play the cartoon she promised him. He touched me again. The room went quiet the way a room goes quiet before a thunderclap. All that borrowed courage thinned in the space between us. I could feel the timeline compressing, the last second stretching like warm glass. My cheek no longer burned. My back no longer registered the music or the HVAC or the murmurs around the island. My world narrowed to distance, angle, witness, consequence. I have a simple rule. I don't start what I can't finish, and I don't finish what I can walk away from. But I also don't let men write on me with their hands and call it fun. He blinked. His finger lifted again. The circle leaned in. The last ladder down vanished behind him. I made my decision. He lifted his finger a 4th time. That was the bell. I didn't wait for contact. I stepped off the line, trapped his wrist with my left hand, rotated my hips, and let his own momentum choose the floor. No haymaker, no shove, no flailing. A simple wrist turn and shoulder draw that teaches gravity to do the talking. His knees buckled and his mouth forgot its script. The room made that sound crowds make when they realize the show just switched genres. I kept it clean. Wrist pinned, elbow anchored, my weight through the long bones so he felt pressure without pain he'd carry home. He tried the classic twist and yank escape you learned from YouTube. It didn't help him. I had angles, he had adrenaline. Big difference. I told him to breathe. He tried to curse. Air came out instead. Phones hovered, then lowered. Everyone suddenly remembered how quiet a living room can be when no one is sure which side of the moment they're on. You're done. I said it quietly, at a distance of 6 inches, because men hear better when the voice lies where their panic is. He nodded too fast. I eased the pressure and let him feel the choice. He made the right one. I helped him to his feet, not because he deserved it, but because I do. He wobbled, rediscovered his center, and stared at the floor like it owed him an apology. The smirk was gone, and with it the theater. He looked smaller without borrowed courage. Most men do. I turned to her. She had the frozen smile of someone stuck in a photo they no longer want to be part of. Her eyes moved to each face in the room, hunting for a new script, a fresh cue. None came. That's the thing about an audience. They love a winner, and they love leaving when the act turns on them. I stepped between her and the crowd so she wouldn't mistake this for a public debate. This isn't a conversation. You made your choice. I'm making mine. She tried to mount the old defense. You're overreacting. It was a joke. We were just having fun, but the word slid over the tile and died. Fun had a broken wrist now and didn't want to play. Then I looked back at him. He'd drifted to the island, nursing his pride, eyes flicking to the door like it might open into another life. I gave him the line he came for, the only gift I had left to offer. Take this junk. I don't need it anymore. The sentence landed in the center of the room and stayed there. No shout, no flourish. Just a statement of inventory. What's mine, what isn't, what leaves with whom. She inhaled like she'd been slapped back. He tried to form a grin and failed. The phones didn't rise again. No one recorded that part. People rarely film the truth. It doesn't go viral. She stepped toward me, palm out, fingers trembling, the same hand that had come across my face 10 minutes earlier. The tremor told me the performance was over and the math had begun. House, accounts, friends, status. I shook my head once. Don't come back home. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked past me, maybe to find the version of me she could still manage. He wasn't in the room. He hadn't been for a while. The host exhaled like he'd been holding his house together with his lungs. I met his eyes. Sorry about the noise. If anything's broken, I'll cover it. Nothing broke, he said, grateful and shaky, as if the vase and the evening had both survived by luck. He moved aside like a man making way for exit, not escape. I faced the ring of friends who'd been cheering when a woman put her hand across her husband's face in a room full of witnesses. I gave them nothing they could use. No lecture, no sermon, no permission to reframe it. I just let them look at what they'd applauded. Silence can be generous when it allows people to hear themselves. She reached for me again, softer now, voice turned low and liquid, trying to trade in the currency that always bought her time. Don't do this. You're being dramatic. We can talk later. We won't. I'm finished talking to a mask. He found half a spine. You can't. He started, then remembered his wrist, and the sentence lost its verbs. I set my glass on the counter, square on a coaster, because order is contagious when you let it be. I pulled my keys from my pocket and removed the one that wasn't mine anymore, the spare I'd given her sister last summer. I set it beside the glass. Small rituals matter. They make decisions visible. By the time you try the door, your code will be dead. That's not a threat. That's a courtesy. Send someone you trust for anything you think is yours. They can meet my attorney. Attorney. The word changed the air pressure. It always does. Phones twitched again, then stilled. People get brave with wine and weaker with paperwork. I've seen it 100 times. She tried one last shape. Tears. Not many, not honest, but placed where a different man might have wanted to see them. I stepped past him and her, toward the door that had looked small when we arrived and normal now. The host moved the shoes gently with his foot, so I had a clear path. His wife whispered thank you without sound. I nodded once. At the threshold I turned back not because I doubted, but because endings deserve clean edges. For the record, I gave you 3 chances. I gave you more than 3 at home. Tonight, I'm giving myself 1. She called my name like it belonged to her. It doesn't. Not anymore. I walked out into the cool air and let it wash the room off my skin. Night carries a different weight when you've reclaimed your center. The street was quiet. My truck waited. I placed my palm against the door, breathed once, and let my pulse finish its work. Then I got in and started the engine. On the drive home, I did what men do when emotion wants the wheel. I ran a checklist. Codes, locks, accounts, access. Not revenge, risk management. Protection is a habit, not a mood. I sent 3 texts. 1 to the locksmith I use for high-end clients, 1 to my attorney, 1 to my operations manager. All short, all action. Her name lit my phone twice, then 3 times, then as a cascade. I didn't touch it. The last gift I was willing to give her was silence. She'd filled enough of my life with noise. At a red light, I looked at my hands. Steady. No shake. That's not victory. That's alignment. When a man's inside matches his outside, the world loses leverage. I drove the last mile with the windows cracked and the radio off, letting the sound of my own tires mark the start line. At my gate, I typed a new temporary code and watched the old one die. Clean. Quiet. Final. He lifted a finger and thought it meant I'd back away. Instead, it turned the page. Some men shout to prove they're men. I've learned the only sentence that matters is the one you enforce. Tonight, I enforced it. The rest is just cleanup. I hit the driveway at 10:48, and the gate closed behind me like a period. Porch light on. House dark. The quiet kind that lets you hear your own shoes on concrete. Inside, I walked the perimeter without thinking about it. Kitchen, hallway, office, garage, checking that everything was where I'd left it. Order steadies a man after a storm. I poured water, not whiskey. Her first text came while I was changing the front door code. You humiliated me. 3 dots. Then, we need to talk. Then, come back and fix this. I left the phone face down on the counter and finished what my hands had started. New deadbolt schedule, new alarm profile, camera notifications tightened to ping only me. Small, deliberate clicks that turned noise into silence. By the time I locked the side gate, she'd moved on to the next tone. I'm sorry. I don't know what got into me. It was the wine. Can we please reset? Then a photo from 3 summers ago at the lake. Her head on my shoulder, the caption, remember this? Emotion as leverage. Water testing the wall. I let it run off. The host called once, then texted. I'm sorry, man. That wasn't okay. Nothing broken. He sounded like a man who'd watched a line he never thought he'd see get crossed in his own kitchen. I told him I appreciated the check-in. I told him to get some sleep. He sent back a thumbs up, quick and relieved. Minutes later, a message from a number I didn't know. I didn't agree with what happened tonight. I'm embarrassed, I laughed. It was one of her friends, the quiet one who hadn't filmed. She followed with a screenshot of their group chat from an hour earlier. The lover had posted a selfie with her shoulder in the frame and the caption fire-tamed. My wife had added a string of laughing emojis and a line about men who crumble. Then, after the floor found him, the thread went silent. 2 of them left the chat. Another typed, this went too far. She replied, he'll come back. He always does. The screenshot ended there. I typed back, keep that. If you're asked later, tell the truth. She wrote, I will. At 11:22, her lover tried his hand. Bro, no hard feelings. Things got heated. She's emotional. Let's be adults. Under the bravado, the cadence was shaky. I could hear the bruise in his pride trying to dress itself as maturity. I didn't answer. He followed with a paragraph about how he respected veterans, how I needed to let go of old school stuff, how she'd been unhappy for a while. The kind of paragraph men write when they think persuasion can fix what their hands broke. I blocked the number and left it there. At midnight, she arrived. Headlights washed across the blinds, then the dull knock of entitled confidence. Knuckles that assume they still live here. The doorbell camera framed her face, mascara less crisp than it had been in the living room, mouth set in the shape of apologies she thought would count. I answered through the intercom. You don't live here anymore. Send someone for your things tomorrow between noon and 2. She stepped back like the gravel had moved. You can't be serious. I heard the tremor that hadn't been there when she had an audience. It's late. Go home. The line disconnected. She called, rang, texted. I let the attempts stack while the house remembered how to be mine. One of her friends tried strategy at 12:17. She's scared. You overreacted. It's not that deep. We're all stressed, you know. Women are allowed to express themselves. It read like a template. I replied with one sentence. Slapping your husband for sport is not expression. She sent nothing back. At 1, the text switched to bargaining. I'll go to counseling. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll post a statement. Don't do this. Then, when I didn't bite, you're cruel. You're abandoning me. You're making me homeless. Panic loves costume changes. I answered once. You have options that don't include me. She replied with a paragraph of insults that tried to sound like strength and a line about how real men fight for their marriages. I set the phone down and cleaned the kitchen. Plates, counter, sink. It took 10 minutes to make the room honest again. Sleep came easy because I'd already made my choice. I woke before the alarm, ran 5 miles under a gray sky, and came back to a porch stacked with plastic storage bins I'd ordered at dawn. The locksmith met me at 8, the same one I use for clients who think precautions are paranoia until their first bad night. He changed the cylinders, reinforced the strike plates, tuned the garage keypad. When he was done, I tipped him and told him to have a good weekend. Precautions aren't hostility, they're boundaries with hardware. By 10, the apology texts had become threats. I'll take half. I'll tell everyone what you did. I'll say you're violent. I forwarded the messages to my attorney with a 2-line summary and a request to schedule a consult. He replied with a calendar invite and one instruction. Don't engage. Already on it. At 11:05, the quiet friend, same one from the screenshot, dropped off a small box on the porch and texted, "This is hers. She shouldn't have it." I opened it on the kitchen table. Inside were a hotel keycard and a folded receipt from a place downtown dated last week with 2 names on the room profile. I closed the lid and set it by the door for noon. At noon, she didn't come. Pride overrides schedules. Instead, a rideshare pulled up and a woman I didn't know stepped out with a tote and a nervous smile. I'm here for her things. I handed her 2 labeled boxes, clothes and personal items, and the small box with the keycard. Sign here, I said, offering a simple receipt that listed contents without commentary. She signed with a hand that shook. When she left, the house felt lighter by an inch. At 1, the lover tried again from another number. Let's meet like men. No women. No drama. He wanted a rematch without witnesses where he could rebuild what the tile floor took away. I blocked the number and made a note for my attorney. At 1:30, my operations manager called about a Monday client who needed a site assessment. We ran the checklist. Work has a way of pinning a man to the present. It did the job. By late afternoon, the group chat fractured completely. Screenshots rolled in from 2 different numbers, apologies without excuses, little admissions that they'd gone along to go along. One wrote, "Seeing you not react messed me up." Another, "I thought it was funny until it wasn't." I told them both the same thing. Tell the truth to yourselves. The rest isn't my business. Her last message of the day came just before dusk. "I can't believe you're doing this to us." Us had already died in her mouth. The word just hadn't received the memo. I put the phone down and took a contractor bag to the closet, pulling her hangers in a clean, quiet rhythm. No rage, no ripping. Just the sound of fabric and a life being sorted. Not revenge, removal. The difference matters. Neighbors walked their dogs past my driveway as the sun slid behind the live oaks. One waved. I waved back. Normal is a discipline like any other. Inside, I stacked boxes by the door and labeled them with a marker. Donate, store, return. Tomorrow, I'd finish. Tonight, I'd keep the promise I made to myself walking out of that living room. No debates, no speeches, no more stage. She'd tried guilt, seduction, blame, and panic. I gave her boundaries and silence. Everyone else could finally see the shape of her choices without my words in the way. When the porch light clicked on, I stood in the entry and let the house breathe. The balance had shifted where it needed to. Off me, back onto the people who made the mess. The lover had lost his borrowed crown. Her friends had found their own faces. Her father had drawn a line she didn't expect. And me? I hadn't won anything. I just stopped losing myself. Respect wasn't restored, it was enforced. The rest of the cleanup would be easy. Trash day was tomorrow. Trash day came with the kind of blue morning you only get after a storm. I brewed coffee, opened the back door, and let the cool air roll in. No music, no TV. Just the scrape of cardboard on tile and the soft thud of contractor bags against the threshold. I didn't rush. I moved the way I've always moved when something needs to be done right the first time, steady, methodical, unbothered by anyone's opinion of my pace. I started with the easy piles, shoes she bought for photographs more than walking, dresses that still carried tags, the stack of branded tote bags that had multiplied in our closet like kudzu. Into the black bags they went. No rage. Just removal. I kept anything legal or irreplaceable. Passport, birth certificate, a small box of old family photos her father once handed me and asked me to keep safe. Those I set aside for a courier with a simple inventory. Everything else found gravity. At the curb, the bins yawned open like mouths. The first bag landed, then the second. Clothes muffled the sound, as if even now they wanted to soften consequences. I didn't narrate it. A man knows when an act is clean because it aligns with the decision he already made. I said she wasn't coming back. The house believed me. The neighborhood too. I rolled the bins into place and nodded to the driver when he came early and lifted them into the truck. He tipped his cap like men do when words aren't required. Inside, I stripped the bed, boxed her vanity, and cleared the bathroom drawers of products that had more syllables than purpose. By 9, rooms had edges again. Walls looked taller. Air moved. I took down 2 framed photos, not to smash them, just to stop pretending. I wrapped them in plain paper and slid them into a box marked return. I don't keep shrines to stories that ended. At 10, I drove to my attorney's office and signed what needed signing. Straightforward. No theatrics. He asked questions. I answered clearly. He reminded me what I already knew. Documentation is oxygen in a room that's trying to burn truth. I handed him the printouts of last night's messages, the time-stamped gate logs, the receipt the friend had delivered, and the list of items transferred. He looked up and said, "You've been preparing for this." Not in the way he meant. Not with folders. With standards. On the way back, I stopped at a hardware store and bought a fresh deadbolt for the shed, a new fire extinguisher for the kitchen, and 4 paint samples. I'm not the type to redecorate as therapy, but a man should leave his own marks in his own home. I also picked up a set of heavyweight bags and a box of contractor gloves. It felt practical. It was. By noon, the courier came for the small box of documents and the 2 framed photos. He signed, I signed. Her friends went silent. The 2 who'd messaged apologies earlier didn't vanish. They just changed orbit. The one who'd filmed at first deleted her post before I ever saw it and sent a long paragraph about peer pressure and wine. I didn't grade it. I replied with the same sentence I give to new hires when they make their first big mistake. Own it, fix it, and learn. She typed 3 words. I will, fully. And that was that. As for the lover, he found a final burner number and sent one more attempt at control disguised as détente. We should talk man to man. I didn't bother blocking. I just left the thread unopened until it disappeared below calendar reminders and work texts. Men think conflict requires 2 signatures. It doesn't. One knowing's a lot of things. She tried last. The texts came in bursts. Anger, romance, logistics, theology, whatever might stick. Then the voicemails I didn't press play on. Then a photo of the lake from 3 summers ago, taken from a distance, as if memory itself could stand in for apology. All of it had the same flaw. Every word assumed my attention was still hers to command. It isn't. She had discovered what happens when a man stops trying to win. He doesn't lose. He leaves. Work filled the corners. Monday morning site assessment, Tuesday range time with a client's executive team, Wednesday a walkthrough at a school upgrading its perimeter. I trained in the afternoons, hit the steel at dusk, ran at dawn. I changed my emergency contacts, updated my medical file, revised the will I hadn't looked at in 3 years. None of it was dramatic. All of it was adult. I also did something small and quiet that mattered more than any of the paperwork. I ordered new sheets, plain white, and a lamp for the guest room I'd never bothered to finish because the marital room always seemed like the right place to be. That night, I slept in the guest room and left the master empty. Not a punishment. A signal. Space is honest when you don't try to force it to feel like something it isn't anymore. A week passed. Word traveled through the same channels that had carried the smirks. People looked at me in the grocery store and then looked at the floor, realizing they weren't supposed to have front row seats to anything. Her social circle started posting quotes about accountability and healing privately. The lover stopped tagging her. The quiet friend sent a final screenshot without commentary. A message from her to the group. I think I misread him, followed by no responses. Sometimes the absence of applause is the first honest review. I didn't celebrate. The point was never to come out ahead of another man or to prove a woman wrong on the internet. The point was to stop running a deficit against myself. When respect left, I closed the account. Simple math. A month in, the court papers came back with dates and assignments. My attorney called them favorable. I called them inevitable. We scheduled the division of what needed dividing. I kept what I'd built. She kept what she'd brought. Anything disputed went to a sell-and split list I didn't lose sleep over. I sent one final text through the legal app we agreed to use. Your boxes will be on the porch Saturday at 10. No adjectives. No adverbs. Just a timetable. Saturday came. The boxes went out. A rideshare arrived with the same woman as before. She signed, I signed. When she turned to leave, she paused and said, "You're handling this with a lot of composure." I told her it wasn't composure. In the afternoon, I took the last contractor bag to the curb. It didn't contain anything of value, just the ghost inventory that lingers in houses after people. Half-burned candles, old hair ties, a cracked phone case, a receipt for a dinner I didn't attend. The bag landed in the bin with a real sound this time. I closed the lid and wheeled it forward. Respect isn't a speech you give someone else. It's the weight you refuse to set down when it gets inconvenient. That evening I sat on the back steps with a glass of water and watched the oaks go black against a pale sky. A neighbor's kid practiced a three-point shot in his driveway, missing more than he made and laughing anyway. Somewhere down the block, a grill clicked and flared. Ordinary life hummed at a frequency I hadn't let myself hear in years. It didn't ask anything of me. It just kept going. People think the heroic part is the takedown or the line that turns a room. It's not. The heroic part is the follow-through when no one is clapping. The choice to stay out of the mud, to lock the door without locking your chest, to rebuild without announcing a grand opening. She reached out again last week from a new number. I heard yesterday she might be moving to another city. I felt nothing. I don't try to win. I don't keep score. I keep standards. And the door I walked through that night stayed closed behind me because respect is not negotiable. Not in war zones. Not in living rooms. Not in the quiet of your own kitchen when a phone lights up with every story but the truth. I didn't get the last word. I got my life back. That's enough.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.